What should we be doing with the likes of Matty Cash and Jarrod Bowen? Who is the best captaincy option ahead of Game Week 14? And would we be tempted to go with a triple up for the likes of Arsenal or Liverpool? Tune in to find out. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. Today we're going to be taking a look at my team selection ahead of Game Week 14. But to start off with, we should be taking a look back at Game Week 13 first. And to be honest, that is a real pleasure for me. 65 points and a big green arrow up to 289k. I've actually halved my rank this week from around 618k to get it under 300k was a big achievement, and really delighted with how it all went in Game Week 13. As you can see on the pitch, it was a pretty low scoring week in general. 65 points was way above the average of around 45. So I gained about 20 points on average. And there was 2 or 3 players that really stood out for me this week. Lascelles and Gordon coming in clutch for Newcastle. Both got a goal each. Gordon obviously getting an assist as well. And both of them under 20% EO meant for a big rank rise for me from just those 2 players. Other players did stand out as well. Saka getting that assist got him 2 bonus points as well. Saliba getting the clean sheet, and obviously Watkins bagging a goal too. Salah and Haaland were kind of by the by. I put the armband on Haaland, did get the goal, didn't get much else other than that, and Salah obviously getting the assist as well. So overall, not a massively high scoring week, but to stand out from the crowd and get 65 points was really good, and hopefully it puts me in good stead as we look ahead to Game Week 14. So let's take a look at how my team's shaping up now. Right then, so let's take a look at my Game Week 14 team selection. And what we always do at the start is quickly analyse the team value and the free transfers. So 2 free transfers this week to play with. Really fortunate to have rolled in Game Week 13 because it's a busy fixture period over the next week. So having 2 free transfers is going to be really important to my planning. And team value is looking really good right now as well. 103.8 million. Hopefully that rises beyond 104 pretty soon, but nothing in the bank at the moment. So I would need to downgrade a player somewhere if I wanted to upgrade elsewhere. So with that aside for now, let's take a look at the goalkeeper situation. And Areola in goal at home to Crystal Palace. On paper, probably isn't the worst fixture for West Ham, but they are conceding a lot of chances. Their XGC is really poor so far this season, and Areola has only kept 1 clean sheet so far. So he is an issue in my squad, especially considering that Turner, my other keeper, has lost his place for Nottingham Forest. So I think in the next few weeks, he's probably a player I do need to think about very carefully if he continues not to keep any clean sheets. However, in the next 4 fixtures, there are 3 pretty decent fixtures for a clean sheet, starting off with Crystal Palace at home. So I think I'm pretty happy to hold on to him for the time being. There are issues elsewhere in my side, and he is getting a couple of save points. So hopefully he's a player I can hold on to. If you want my extended thoughts on Areola, then do check out my transfer tips video from earlier this game week where I cover him at length. The same goes for Matty Cash in defence. So let's move on to the defenders now, starting with Cash. So Bournemouth away is a good fixture. At the end of the day, we want to hold on to our players when they play probably one of those bottom 4 sides. I would count Bournemouth as one of the weaker sides in the league at the moment. So Matty Cash up against Bournemouth, he will get forward. I do expect a good chance for an attacking return in this game generally, and Aston Villa to score quite a few goals. The question over him at the moment is he going to retain his starting spot, having been taken off at half-time against Spurs and looked pretty shaky, not just last week, but also in weeks gone by as well. So he is a source of frustration for a lot of us. He is a player that I am considering transferring out this week, but probably more likely next week and beyond, because next week and beyond they go on a fixture run where it's, I think, Man City and Arsenal back-to-back. But this week, I think I've got other issues to sort out first. And Matty Cash, if he does start, if he does retain his starting place, I'm really happy to own him against Bournemouth away from home. Now, it's also important to quickly note the fact that I've got Taylor as my first defensive sub. So if Matty Cash doesn't play, then Taylor can come off the bench at home to Sheffield United. So even if he doesn't play, even if we get word that he's not going to start this game week, then Taylor can just come in against Sheffield United, who are really struggling to score at the moment. So I wouldn't mind that as a backup. So I think that Matty Cash can get a stay of execution in my side for this game week, and then next week onwards, I'll probably look at selling him. Moving over to Tsimikas at home to Fulham, I think he's not going to be a problem until we start seeing him actually get rotated, and he's been fine recently. I don't think he's been sensational. He's got his own defensive frailties, but he's still starting, he's still getting good minutes, and Fulham at home is a good fixture. I think he'll probably get benched in one of the next three, but I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that he doesn't. But I think, being realistic, 3 games in 7 days for Tsimikas, especially when they've got other players that can come in, could be a little bit of an issue, or at least he might get his minutes managed in one of those games. For the meantime, though, I'm going to treat him as a non-issue. It's a good home fixture, and I think that Liverpool will start Tsimikas in game week 14. Maybe 15 is the more likely game for him to get rotated out. I'm not sure at the moment, but I think for the time being, Tsimikas is definitely going nowhere in my starting 11. Moving on to Saliba. It's a great defence. Arsenal are statistically the best defence in the league at the moment in terms of underlying data, and of course are keeping a lot of clean sheets. Wolves are a good side. I think they've been very unfortunate not to get a few more VAR decisions go their way so far this season. But Arsenal, at the end of the day, are a great defence, and I expect Saliba to have a pretty good chance of a clean sheet. Moving on to the idea of double Arsenal defence. As I mentioned in the start of the video, could we be tripling up on Arsenal? And I think the way that most people will be looking at doing that is with a double defence. Now, I don't mind it if you want to go for it this game week, but as I've already mentioned, I'm pretty happy with my back 3, so I don't need to be making that transfer this game week. But from game week 16 onwards, Arsenal go on a run of Aston Villa, Brighton and Liverpool. All 3 are really good attacks. So I don't think that if you're making a transfer this week, it's not the worst thing in the world. You can short-term it. You can have 14 in game week and game week 15 as well. And those are good fixtures for Arsenal. But if you're doing it next game week onwards, then you're only really getting the benefit of game week 15. So maybe it's probably not worth doubling up on the Arsenal defence if you're not going to go for it right now. And I'm personally not. So I'm probably going to swerve the double defence for the time being and maybe look at moving transfers around elsewhere. Right, so let's move on to the midfield and putting Salah to one side for a minute because he will feature heavily later on in the video as one of the best captaincy options, and I'll put him up head-to-head with Erling Haaland at length then. For the time being, he'll go to one side. Let's have a look at Heung-min Son. Away at Man City, not a great fixture, and quite a few managers are looking at selling him this game week. I did discuss him earlier on this week in my transfer tips video, and just to summarise that as briefly as possible, I think for me, I've got bigger fish to fry right now. I've got bigger issues in my squad, and I still expect him and Spurs to create plenty of chances for Son to get at the end, to be at the end of quite a number of chances, even with a pretty rough run of fixtures in the next 3 against Man City, West Ham and Newcastle. Son is still going to collect a few chances, and I still expect him to tick over pretty nicely for the next few game weeks, even without James Maddison creating even more for him. Spurs are geared towards creating him chances. Yes, Man City is a tough fixture, and yes, the next 3, or at least 2 of the next 3, aren't great for Tottenham on paper, but they are still creating chances for him. So for me, I'm going to hold on to him and hope that he's going to repay the faith. And then by the time game week 17 and in particular 18 comes along, I'll already have him in situ. And I think a lot of managers are going to struggle to get back to him when the fixtures turn good again, because he has had quite a hefty price rise since the start of the season. So a lot of us have value tied up in him at the moment. Moving across to Bukayo Saka, he is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds this week. He's already around 50% EO where I'm ranked, and he's going to probably climb even further because he is ticking along nicely. The fixtures are still looking good for the short term for Arsenal, so 15 included in that as well. So I understand why he's being bought by a lot of managers. That being said, his underlying data isn't fantastic as of late, especially looking at his XG. So I could understand why people are looking at swerving him for this game week and maybe looking elsewhere. I think overall, I'm just happy to already have him in my side. I don't need to make that decision. But if I were you, if you had a slot free and you had the money in the bank to do so, Saka would be a pretty easy buy this game week, because at the end of the day, He plays 90 most weeks. He is ticking along really nicely, and I think he's a bit of a season keeper if he continues to do so. Moving on, I'm going to ignore Bowen for the time being because he is probably going to be my potential transfer out this week. So I'll look at that in just a moment's time. But Anthony Gordon at home at Man United initially was going to be one of my transfers out this game week in my forward thinking, in my planning in weeks past. But considering the form he's in and considering the fact that Newcastle just don't have too many other options to start at the moment, Anthony Gordon probably stays for the time being. Man United at home this game week, and then the fixture run is starting to soften again, and all the way through to game week 18 or 19, I think it looks actually really good again. So he's not going anywhere. He's great value for money at the moment, and he's going to hopefully continue to start games and get good minutes considering the form he's in. Yes, he's overperforming. Yes, 5 goals and 5 assists is a pretty significant overperformance on the data he's putting down, but Newcastle are a team that can easily bag 3 or 4 in any home fixture, as they've already proven, and Anthony Gordon looks in sensational form right now, so he's going absolutely nowhere in my squad. However, I did mention a transfer, and Bowen is probably the guy on the chopping block, so let's have a look at the transfer I've got in mind for this game week. So it's a move that actually on paper looks pretty obvious, to be fair, and I think I've mentioned it in weeks gone past. It was a transfer I was looking at potentially making in game week 13, but we didn't really have concrete enough news on Jarrod Bowen, whether he's going to start or not. So I took a gamble on him getting minutes against Burnley. Sadly, that didn't happen. It actually looks a lot more likely that he's going to start this game week against Crystal Palace. So maybe for a lot of us, if you've already got the likes of Mbeumo in your side, you probably don't need to look at moving him out anymore. West Ham's fixtures at the end of the day are still looking pretty decent, and he has been really, really good as a FPL asset this season. 8 goals, 1 assist. The underlying data from an XG point of view is above 0.4, which is really strong for a player of his value. So I think he's a really good hold if he is noted as a starting player in game week 14. If we get any news that he's expected to start, then he is a good hold, and I am tempted at potentially holding him for that reason. However, there are a number of reasons why I'm probably, despite whether or not he's going to start, if he does start, I'll probably still look at making this move. The reason being is that the fixtures on paper are better for Brentford. Their next 4 are really favourable for attacking returns. They've got Luton at home this game week. They've got Aston Villa and Brighton in the next 4 as well. And they've also got Sheffield United as well in there. So even the more difficult fixtures against Aston Villa and Brighton, I still expect Brentford to score in both of those games, and Mbeumo is the most likely player to do so. He's on penalties. His underlying data, even without those penalties, is really, really strong, and it's matching up really well to Bowen as well. So overall, I think the fixtures are in his favour. The price is obviously in his favour, and it means that I can downgrade funds from Jarrod Bowen to Bryan Mbeumo, have those funds elsewhere to make a move, maybe upgrade Matty Cash, maybe upgrade Areola in the next couple of game weeks. So I think it gives me a lot of options moving forward in terms of the price, and then also in terms of the underlying data as well. He's slightly better than Jarrod Bowen too. So yes, there's an issue with him blanking in game week 18, but I think I'm only going to be exposed with 2 blankers come game week 18 anyway, which would be Mbeumo and Haaland. So worst comes to worst, I can always just transfer him out around then anyway with 1 free transfer and just bench Haaland. So I don't think that's going to be a massive issue. I think there's a lot going for this transfer, and I think overall it's pretty much a keep it simple, stupid situation where I'm not going to overthink this one. As long as we go into the deadline with no news of Mbeumo being injured or benched or anything like that, I'll make that move probably later this game week, maybe even later today, because I don't think there's much risk of Mbeumo getting rotated going into game week 14. So here's my full team selection with that transfer loaded in, and that midfield is now looking really nice with Mbeumo in situ at home to Luton as well. So really happy with that. Probably going to make that move either tonight or in the next couple of days. Let's move on to the forward line, and Haaland in my bus team has the captaincy armband, as I mentioned, I'll be discussing the Salah versus Haaland captaincy debate later on in the video, so do stay tuned for that. I haven't made my mind up whatsoever. It's literally just on him at the moment because it was on him last week. So do stay tuned for that. Moving on to Ollie Watkins, Bournemouth away from home. We've already talked about the fixture. Bournemouth are a really poor defence, and I expect Watkins to continue his good run of form. 7 goals, 8 assists already so far this season. Yes, there are other good strikers putting up good numbers at the moment, Isak being one of those options. But I think Watkins is a player with good enough data in a good enough attack that I'm probably just going to hold on to him for the foreseeable, unless he gets injured, unless we start worrying more about rotation. I think he's a player that despite the fixtures roughening in the next couple, I think from next game week onwards, they're not ideal. I think Watkins is still a really good hold despite those fixtures, and he can score against absolutely anyone, and Villa can also score against absolutely anyone. So nothing to be scared of there. Yes, Darwin's a good option. Yes, Isak's a good option, but would I sell Watkins for either of them this game week? Probably not. Let me know in the comments below what you would do with Watkins. Maybe not this game week, but probably next game week onwards when they go up against Man City and Arsenal, because it is a debate to be had. I think for me, he probably stays though. Archer is the first bench player at the moment. I might swap him around with Taylor because Archer is just not in good form. Sheffield United are not a good attack. And actually, I'll probably favour Taylor to keep a clean sheet over Sheffield United to score at all, let alone Archer to be the one on the end of it and getting the goal. So I might swap those two over. But again, let me know in the comments below what you think of that. In the meantime, though, there is one big final debate to be had, and I think it's going to go down to the wire for a lot of FPL managers this week, and that is whether to captain Erling Haaland or Mo Salah. So let's take a look at the data and come to a conclusion. So the captaincy debate is one that will go down to the wire and will be hotly contested this game week. And the two main captaincy options, I think, inarguably, are probably going to be Haaland and Salah. So taking a look at the underlying data first and foremost, Haaland is obviously more of a goal threat. I don't think that's any surprise whatsoever. 1.08 XG per 90 is absolutely ridiculous. Salah also ticking along really nicely, by the way. 0.69 is really, really strong, especially for a midfielder, or at least classified as a midfielder. Still very, very good. And he does beat him in terms of XA, so he is creating a lot of chances. XA of 0.28 is very, very strong. In terms of the actual output, Haaland has got more returns this season so far with 17. Salah getting 15, but because he's a midfielder getting the extra point for the goal, he's also ticking along really nicely with bonus, and he'll get the odd clean sheet point. Does mean he's overall getting more points per match at 8.2 versus Haaland with 7.9. So that is something to consider for captaincy as well, that even though Haaland is more likely to be getting the goals and getting the attacking returns, Salah, even without getting quite so many, will also still get the extra little bits of bonus and the extra little bits of clean sheet points that boost him and make him an ever so slightly better asset as well. With all of that in mind, taking a look at the opponent is going to be really important this game week. Now, both of which are at home. Tottenham at home for Erling Haaland, Salah going up against Fulham at home. Now, I don't think there's too much surprises over which is the better fixture on paper. Now, Fulham is green on the ticker for good reason. They've got an XGC per 90 of 1.84, so they're conceding almost 2 goals a game, or at least expecting to concede at least 2 goals a game against the average Premier League team. Now Salah even is obviously in a team that is far, far above the average. So Fulham look like a team that are probably going to expect to concede 3 or 4 goals this game week. Now, on paper, that's really, really good. But what I would say is Salah isn't the only player in that Liverpool lineup who's likely to score those goals. With the likes of Darwin Núñez up front, he also gets a very, very high amount of XG and a large amount of the chances. That will help Salah in terms of chance creation, but it also means that there's another player probably getting 1 or 2 of those goals in the mix too. Whereas with Haaland up against Spurs, yes, Spurs on paper have a better underlying XGC, so you might just want to go off of that alone. I think it's important to provide some context that they are still without quite a lot of their most crucial defensive assets. Van de Ven is out for a while. Romero still isn't back from his suspension. So there's all the chance in the world that Spurs are going to start that game with no centre-backs in their starting 11. Now, Eric Dyer is the one starting centre-back that they could be playing, but last game week, they went without any centre-backs. They went with 4 full-backs, 2 of which playing at centre-back, mainly because of the pace in behind. They want to be able to match their high line with pacey defenders that can recover the ball and make recovery runs with pace. Eric Dyer seemingly isn't that guy, so they're probably going to be starting with 4 fullbacks once again against Erling Haaland, who is unquestionably lethal in those sort of situations. And I think his intelligence running off the final man, even against a very good centre-back who has great tactical nous, he's one of the best in the world at doing that. Now, when he goes up against a full-back who's not used to playing in those positions and someone that hasn't even been getting that many minutes this season, I'd expect Erling Haaland to really have a lot of joy, and especially with the creative assets that City have all feeding Erling Haaland, I think he could have an absolute field day. So yes, the underlying data does favour Salah captaincy, but I think when you take the game state into context, I think Spurs are more likely to give up a lot more chances than we would normally expect them to. And I think overall, even if both teams, Man City and Liverpool, score 3 or 4 goals, it's slightly more likely that Haaland is going to get more of those goals against Tottenham and the way that Man City play generally than Salah would against Fulham. Now, obviously, this could go either way, and it's a very tight call, and I can completely understand why managers would go with Salah captaincy, because there's not really much in it whatsoever. I think it's going to be a split camp in terms of the actual effective ownership this game week. I think there'll be a lot of managers who do captain Salah, and it could go either way in terms of the overall points. So it could be quite a harsh week in terms of captaincy. If you pick the wrong one and one doesn't go off and one does, then it's going to probably be a red arrow for you. And I think no matter which one you pick, you're taking a calculated gamble that you're hopefully getting on the right end of it. At the end of the day, though, there's not much in it. I think personally, I'm going to favour the fact that Haaland is going up against probably 2 fullbacks at centre-back playing out of position, and Man City are going to create a lot of chances for him. So I think personally, I'm going to stick the armband on Haaland, vice-captaincy on Salah, and hope that there isn't too much of a negative swing against me and Salah gets a massive haul and Haaland gets a pretty rare blank. So fingers crossed it works out for me, but do let me know in the comments below where the captaincy armband is going for you this game week, because it really could go either way. I think Salah is actually probably the slight favourite in all of the polls I've seen so far, so do let me know in the comments below whether you agree with my hypothesis on Haaland or whether you prefer to stick it on, probably on paper, the easier fixture against Fulham at home for Salah. So there you have it. That's my team selection ahead of Game Week 14. Please do, as always, let me know in the comments below if you've got any questions ahead of the deadline, and I will try and answer them before we hit the Game Week 14 deadline. As always, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. It really does help to support the channel. And I'll see you next week, where we've got a lot of content coming. Game Week 15 in the midweek, and then Game Week 16 the following weekend. So I'm going to be putting out a lot of content next week, so do make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of it. But I look forward to seeing you ahead of Game Week 15 as we start preparing for what is a really busy fixture period.